Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to be sitting with Nick and Mark of TACK. We're going to kick off with an intro of both of them. I'm just going to read out their bios. And if you have any questions, always drop it in the chat. So starting with Mark. Mark is the CEO and co-founder of TACK, a media network and go-to-market firm aiding businesses in converting demand into revenue with their people-first GTM model. Definitely want to hear more about that. Previously, he was the CMO of AirMeet and VP of Content and Community at Drift, where he grew the Drift Insider community to over 65,000 members. Before Drift, he founded and led HubSpot Academy, contributing to HubSpot's growth to over 600 million in revenue by educating and certifying millions. And I was one of them. Nick Bennett, TACK's co-founder and chief customer officer, is a B2B marketer with a decade-long career in the tech industry. His specialty lies in formulating go-to-market strategies, advocating a people-first approach to foster meaningful connections, and spurring revenue growth, as well as the creator economy in B2B. Off duty, this Boston-based marketer enjoys playing baseball weekly and cherishes time spent with his 3 daughters. And y'all probably know me. I'm a growth marketer, founder of Polaris, and really focused on sustainable, scalable marketing programs, often from scratch with tech founders who kind of get the ick from marketing and sales. And that's where we come in and help. So I also want to quickly jump in and celebrate. TACK is 1 year old. So exciting.
Thanks, Kinsey.
Definitely.
Quite a journey.
It is. I can only imagine what it's been like to, I can only imagine what it's been like to grow a community like this over the last year and all the tumult. So kudos to y'all. Let's start with a big question. Go to market. What are some of the challenges that I think we've all been there? What are some of the challenges that you see most often and or mistakes you see founders make that are totally avoidable?
I'll give you 3 really quick. Getting people's attention, messaging and positioning, and keeping people's attention.
That's a good one.
Well, I was going to add on to that because I've also got 3. Channel saturation. It's super hard to stand out in crowded markets. I think there's a rising cost of acquisition costs, like from a CAC perspective. So like your traditional marketing methods that, people love to use the same playbook, like they're becoming less and less effective. They're becoming more and more expensive. And the last one is misaligned teams. I've talked a lot about silos in the past, but like often marketing, sales, product, CS, they're not in sync, which ultimately leads to inconsistent messaging and experiences.
Totally. That question of saturation and cost are things that I hear all the time. My advice is usually something along the lines of understand your customer, really know where they live, and then you can provide curated community-based experiences for them. I know y'all have this people first kind of model, so we'd just love to hear your take on that and how you see that at play.
Yeah, people first GTM is an approach that really tries to take each and every person, both your customers, buyers, and employees, and put them at the center of each experience. And how it does that is through the power of storytelling, relationships, and partnerships. And we've designed this model that takes 7 pretty common growth strategies. And Kinsey, you probably know all of them. You're very well versed in B2B go-to-market. And a lot of people know most of them too, right? It's anything from content-led growth, product-led growth. And we tried to package them in a way that made sense so people could understand, here's how you actually use the power of those 3 things, storytelling, relationships, and partnerships, and apply it in the context of, say, your product-led growth strategy, if you have one, or your content-led growth, or your event-led growth, or community-led growth, or customer-led growth, right? There's these 7. So we are helping businesses think through their go-to-market from an approach that hopefully matches how they market and sell and service their customers to how people want to buy things, want to experience different interactions with a business these days. And it's instead of like pushing things on people, which is definitely more of a company first approach, you're pushing your message out through paid channels, through a lot of promotion, through cold, outbound, whatever it is, you're more working with people. So there's definitely elements of inbound, right? I was at HubSpot for a long time, so it's like elements of inbound marketing in there, but there's elements of a lot of other things in there as well. And I think this is really important as more and more of our lives become automated and digitalized and become more almost on autopilot, thanks to what's
Totally.
happening with all of this new technology and these new it's both hardware and software when it comes to artificial intelligence.
Totally. I would love to hear a little bit more about that because I feel like a combination, I don't know, to me, AI is influencing some of that saturation feeling or oversaturation feeling that we have. And also, I've read a couple articles that are talking about how consumers are a little bit weary of all of the technology that's surrounding them all the time. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from y'all about how you think about go to market when it's crowded, it's noisy, and people are a little bit burnt out.
Hmm.
I know it's tough. I'm trying to solve this problem every single day, so I have my strong opinions on it, but I'll share those. And I can
Well,
kick us off if you want.
well, I was just gonna say, going back to like the AI piece of it, because I think, there's AI can definitely play a big piece in it. And like for me, the big thing is like predictive analytics. How can
Mm,
AI help identify patterns in customer behavior that ultimately allows you a more targeted and effective go-to-market effort? And going back to the people first piece, it's like if you can understand and analyze customer behavior and understand how the analytics, and like for me, I'm not a great math person, like I'm not great at putting stuff together, but like I use AI to automate a lot of the things that like I don't want to do. And customer behavior, it's so interesting to be able to see how it correlates, and then how when you put a person at the center of everything through, I mean, simple stuff. I mean, we're just talking about like, instead of your marketing emails coming from marketing at xyzcompany.com, it's like coming from Nick at
yeah.
TACK.com, for example. And it's like that human approach mixed with like understanding that customer behavior and how that journey actually maps out. I think AI can be very disruptive there. I think it can also really help in a crowded market. Going back to like the personalization, it's like, how do you personalize at scale? And it's tough. I think AI can definitely help tailor content. It can
Mm,
tailor experiences for individual members, whether from your community. Like we have a community of about 140 people right now, and I think AI can definitely help with that in a crowded space too.
definitely.
For me, it's like about what humans have that AI doesn't have,
Hmm.
which is actually the lived experience. Right. So
Totally.
it goes back to that idea of storytelling and the experiences that you have um, had, but also you've shared with other people. Like a good example of this is what happened just at the Olympics the other day, which is the person who's surfing got a 9.9 out of 10 on this
Hmm.
ridiculous wave, and the photo was incredible. And I'm like, oh, AI could have created that. Like, no, it can't. It can't create that
No,
moment. AI doesn't
no.
can't figure that out. Um, so I think there's going to be a big shift where the tide's coming back in to have everything be more human again. I really do, and that's why we're betting hard on people first GTM. AI, the term is going to be gone soon because no one gives a
Mm,
shit about AI. They
yeah,
they they just want their stuff to be better, to be easier, to be faster.
yep,
That's it,
totally.
right? And we just want to get back to living a bit more. We've been slaves to machines and optimizing machines, looking at data, all this stuff. And like
Yeah,
now, all of that's going to be able to happen almost in the background, and we'll get back to what really is important is solving problems that are truly important to people versus trying to solve a problem with Marketo, right? And
totally.
like that's just a bunch of nonsense, honestly.
Totally agree. I feel so aligned with what both of y'all just shared. I feel like this is a moment where it's scary because everything has changed. Those old playbooks, they're boring, they're broken, they're not working. But what it unlocks for us is the ability to really root down into that human side of things. What can you, as a brand, as a culture, as a company, do that's different than what anybody else out there can do? And how do you attract customers in a way that's also a lot more creative than it has been? I mean, if I see another bubbly sass cartoon, I'm going to stab my eyeballs out. I think we're done with that. And now there's time. We have this kind of beautiful moment where everything is shifting. And so we can be really, really creative. And um, I love the idea of AI helping to automate and make analysis possible in a way that it hasn't been, or maybe hasn't been accessible. Founders today have more technology at their fingertips than they've ever had. In that way, it makes launching easier. But I don't think you can afford to launch and go to market if you're not being really, really thoughtful about that human side of the problem you're actually solving, who you're actually serving. Like that, there you can't overinvest in understanding that, I don't think, because it makes the biggest difference in whether you're going to be successful.
You need to build an audience and community first, or at the same time before you build a product.
Yeah,
I'm
interesting.
dead set on that. Dead set.
I love that. I've been thinking about like community in the context of go to market since probably, I don't know, February of this year. With everything after COVID, all of a sudden I'm in more communities than I've ever been in before. And it's so meaningful. And I go there for curated information. So I'm wondering, like, how would you advise somebody who's getting started? Maybe they've kind of established some early signals of product market fit, but they're not 100% there. Like, when do you tell them it's time to think about community? Should they have already done it by then? I want to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
I mean, they should have already done it, quite frankly. I mean,
Yeah.
what they need to do now, if they haven't, is really think about their first customers as partners. You know, there's the term design partners that's been out there for a while. But how do you partner with your early customers to not just talk about the product, but talk about the problems, what they're feeling, like their day in their life? A great company that does this now, and we use their technology, the former HubSpotters, is Day.ai, and they're taking this whole approach around. We're building the product with other people, not for people. Just like how you build a good community, you build it with people, not for people. And like how you build product, I think, is evolving, because now I don't want to say everyone, and it's not perfect. Like I couldn't build probably a product from scratch, but I can be pretty dangerous with code now, right? AI is giving everyone a huge amount of new skills. Like if you're not using AI to gain new skills, like you will be at a disadvantage, like straight up. Like, so I recommend trying a new AI tool every either month or week and seeing how that can play into either something you're doing today or something that you wanted to do or have aspired to do, and if it can help you get closer to that. The critical thinking piece is a huge component of what makes a person or a group of people successful. So that is still a very important nuance to this whole conversation. So don't overlook the ability to critically think and make decisions. But I think just from a going back to your question, from like a product standpoint, you want to really develop those relationships and then those deeper partnerships with your customers, especially early on, because you want to ultimately activate a word of mouth motion, which is an outcome of a people first GTM, strategy. One of the things is it's going to help you develop stronger word of mouth, a better brand, and more durable growth, more like efficient growth. So that only happens though when you take the time to truly understand someone.
Totally.
I was going to say, it's funny because I actually wrote about this on LinkedIn today, like from like a customer onboarding perspective, because I've been at some companies where like the onboarding has been terrible. And you're talking at your customers versus with them. And I think it goes with Mark, kind of like what he was just talking about, but customer-led growth is something that I think is important, kind of ties back to word of mouth as well. But like having that onboarding process and having them be a part of your mission and kind of belief system, I think is incredibly important.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. I often say, like, your best marketers are already paying you. Like, your customers are the people who can help you really grow. And I love the way you articulated, both of y'all, that yes, it happens at the very earliest stages of your relationship with them in the way that you leverage them in marketing, but it also is that onboarding experience is so singular. You only get one shot to do it right. And if you kind of, as you said, we've all been in onboarding experiences where you get talked at and then you churn. It doesn't, like, there's no relationship built there, and there's too many other companies who are focusing on it to do a bad job. Like that competition there is really, really stiff. There's really, really smart people designing beautiful onboarding experiences. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about how what's going on right now influences, if it does, a go-to-market strategy you would recommend. We've obviously got the election, we've got media cycles that are nuts, an economy that's shifting. Like, how does that factor in your opinion?
I mean, I'll give a quick, I mean, I don't know if I have a ton of insight here, but like, I think for me, like, generally speaking, elections can create uncertainty, shifts in consumer behavior. I think for me and for us, and, I know right before this, we were all just on a call together and we kind of talked a little bit about this, but, I think you can use content still, and I think this should be one of the main levers of what you're doing around this to provide valuable information for your industry. Like it's content that's valuable, content that educates regardless of the outcome of an election or everything that's going around, whoever wins. Like content will still win and will help you kind of cement yourself as like, all right, cool. Like regardless, like I follow Nick for this content because it can help me understand how it's going to fit into me as a consumer. I think that, depending on like the different election outcomes, you may target your audience slightly differently. I don't know. You might, but I think it comes back to having a plan, and being able to plan accordingly, being able to pivot quickly, adapt, understand, learn. And I know, Mark, you had some thoughts right before this about that you think the economy could get better as well.
Well, yeah, I think you got to focus on what you can control. So try to control your own destiny as much as you can. That I'm a big believer in that. So what can you control? You can control how much you learn from your customers, how much you talk to your customers. You can control where you spend your money, what you spend your money on. You can control who you hire, who you don't hire. You can control the goals you set. Definitely. People overlook that one. You can control how you respond to situations. You can't really control a situation per se. Sometimes you can control how you prepare for situations. So I say all these things. I think people sometimes just overlook or forget or neglect to think that, like, look, just like, let me focus on the things I can control and not spend mental energy thinking about these other things. It's always fun from time to time to be like, oh, what could happen? Because you control, how you plan. So you have to think like, well, if this happens for this election or this happens, like, what does that mean for me? But it's really abstract, right? That type of stuff is really abstract unless you're like in the inside and a lot. So yeah, for us, it's more about going back to the fundamentals, right? Like having a really good grasp of your P&L. Like if you're a marketing leader who doesn't understand the P&L of your business, I think that's a problem. I think every marketing leader needs to understand how a business makes money, how it, retains, that money, or retains their customers, I should say. And how is it trying to grow? And so it's like marketing leaders these days need to get really in tune with the financials of a business. And they also need to get really in tune with the pricing and packaging of how the product today, but in the future is going to be sold. Because those two things go so hand in hand, and they're so involved in how you think about your go-to-market. Like how you grow and stuff. So yeah, and those things you can control for the most part,
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't think about it, you can sell yourself off a cliff. Like that's a nightmare situation. I'm kind of in the mode of, know that it's out there, but ignore it. Like you have to understand the emotional zeitgeist, of course, but to your point, you can't really control what happens in the election. We even if we could predict it and could control it, things surprise you. So the only thing that I have noticed that seems persistent in buying behavior is this seeming desire for more security possibly than in the past, less willingness to take a flyer on something. And so maybe it's a moment to reconsider your contract terms, how you are selling, how you try to get people on board and then delay pricing at certain moments. Like you can be creative and responsive about that, but ultimately, it's probably, there's some fear, there's some uncertainty, there's a desire for security, and really a desire to just be taken care of. Like how many times do you buy something and then it ends up creating more work for you? Like that, but that comes back to, marketing being aligned with customer experience and with onboarding and all of the things that we've already talked about. You can't go to market successfully if you're not really thinking about the full cycle of that person's journey.
Oh, sorry, Kenzie. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, you're spot on. Treat your customers well. Like focus on both your buyers and customers. Like just, and that's why Nick and I preach, and Nick's probably sick of me saying this over and over again. Like we over communicate. We over communicate with our customers. We over communicate with our buyers without like annoying them and like saying like what's going on in the deal. But like over communicate, surprise and delight. Do things that are going to show them that you really do care. You genuinely are here to help them, and that you're a partner for them.
I love that. Do you think that it's possible, like if you're not an expert, you're a founder, you don't have a big budget, can you successfully build a go-to-market strategy without hiring an expert to help you with it? Like, is it something you can wing? I feel like I know the answer. But
Well, yeah, because you can learn so much now. I mean, like,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, if your motivation, intent, conviction is, I think that's a. I hate absolute statements, but that's close to an absolute, like 100%. Yeah, you can do that.
yeah, I feel like that. I agree. I want to say no because like that's my bread and butter, but at the same time, it's yes. Like you, if you care and you're invested, you can, and you don't need to let it hold you back just because you can't afford. It's about understanding and building that relationship with like literally one customer to start.
Just talk
And
to
build
people.
them apart. Yeah, just talk to people. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. We've got some questions, but I want to jump a little bit into, any KPIs that you're looking at specifically right now, any kind of how do we measure success? And part of the reason that I'm asking that is there are no end to the number of channels you can be on. To answer that question, you have to understand your customers, as we've talked about. You have to think about the conditions of what you're selling and all that. But once you've landed on your channels, then you have to make sure that your hypotheses are validated. So how do you do that? Are there recommendations y'all have for what to be thinking about as you define those KPIs and your goals?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in for a few things. I think there's some things. I mean, there's things that we look at, but some of the stuff that when I was in house, for example, that I looked at, and I think people should look at in general, is obviously your customer lifetime value, your CLV. I think that's important. And maybe this is more because I spent a little bit of time in customer marketing, but your net promoter score, like if your customers are happy, we all know it costs less to retain a customer than go out and acquire a new one. But also referral rates. Are your customers referring you to more people? What's your customer acquisition cost, your CAC? What's your retention rate? What's your time to value for new customers? Like, I worked for a company before Mark and I did this. Alice, they were in the gifting space. And at a time, our time to value for customers was 90 days. So a quarter, they signed a 1-year contract. So you're saying they only really have 9 months to use the product. I was able to cut that down to sub 30 days, which gives you so much more time to experience the product. Because if you can deliver value in those first, 60 days, they're going to be your customer for life, hopefully. And then another, I mean, going back to like, if you're on social, it's like from a content engagement perspective, what are the views? What are the shares? What are the time spent? If you're on YouTube, what do those analytics look like? What are your community engagement metrics? How many active members do you have? What's the participation rates? I mean, there's a lot more, but those are some of the things that I think, at least in my mind, are important to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just got to track things on a weekly basis. If you don't track most of your metrics every week, I don't think you're doing it right. Some things deserve daily tracking, absolutely. Some things actually probably deserve real-time tracking, depending on the company and the scale. For example, like, you don't want your website to go down, so you should track the uptime of a website if you're a company like a little bit bigger than TACK, right? Like, say, yeah, you'd be surprised how many companies don't have that though in place. Like, you're like, oh, our website has been down for 3 minutes. Like, what?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So anyway, like it's for me, it's all about like the discipline. A lot of what we're talking about, if you go back to your last question, like, can you learn go to market? Is like, just how disciplined are you? And discipline's hard, right? Like, self-discipline is not an easy thing, because in some ways, marketers are to blame. Marketers are blasting so much crap at you every day, and that's eroding your self-discipline. So yeah, for us, we have this weekly pacing document that we track everything. I've been doing it for a long, long time, and we've introduced it to a lot of our customers, where your KPIs are tracked every week, so you can see trends, you can see issues, you can spot things, and it's just a matter of looking at the leading and lagging indicators for both the pre-sale motion and the post-sale motion. And Nick mentioned many of them, and making sure the most important thing with metrics, though, is ownership. Who owns the metric? Like, if more than one person own a metric, I don't know. I mean, it's usually not good. It's usually not a good thing, right? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I like the call out there of like leading versus lagging. And in those critical kind of, if you're trying to do a launch where there's a big splash moment, then being able to kind of track the connection between the splash that you make and how that turns into customers can feel really tricky. But if you start to define it, am I internally considering this more of a leading, more of a lagging, then you can build better hypotheses. And sometimes you might not have enough data for it to be, quote unquote, statistically significant, but that's okay. Part of what you're doing early is just building that muscle so that you can keep doing it more consistently and better as you grow. It doesn't have to be gorgeous either. An Excel spreadsheet is absolutely fine to get started, and more than most people have. I bet y'all have horror stories. I know I do. Okay, cool. So I've got a couple questions here. One from Melissa. Recommendations on the top 1 to 3 things that will make a difference in this market. Big question. I think we've touched on some of them.
Make a difference in this market. We've definitely touched on some of them around like getting really in tune with what's going on with your customers, how they're using your product. Nick's point around customer values is extremely important. Like, how can you make sure that people are seeing value within ideally 30 days, but 90 is probably the max. For like more of a pre-sale thing, it's about leaning into what makes you different and really trying to figure out that positioning and messaging. So it took Nick and I probably 9 months to figure out the one line for everything that we do. Our whole thing, no matter if you're talking about our media side, the community, our on-demand services, we help companies match how they go to market to how people buy. So when I say that, when Nick says that, people, I get that. That makes sense. And that's different. A lot of people I don't think anyone really says that actually. So how can you get your thing down to that one sentence that you can then tell a story about?
Yes, that somebody's going to have an aha moment about and feel really connected to and resonate with. Yeah, Nick.
Yeah, I was going to say the only thing I was going to add is have a point of view on something, stand for something, even if others don't completely agree with it. I think that's important to stand out in a crowded market today too.
That's a good point there. That's a really good point there. And that work can be very therapeutic and sometimes hard to do, but is absolutely necessary. Yeah. And, there's folks who can help you unearth that, but probably just spending the time with the brand and what you're trying to build to get there is that's also something that you can do on your own. So a question here from Mickey. Can you provide specific outputs or next steps? I find my clients have the best success with go-to-market when they understand their audience well. Yes, definitely. And make a comms plan to address each barrier, task, and channel. So I guess the way that I read that is all right, say you understand your audience well, what's next?
You go first, Nick.
You can go first.
It all comes down to your goals and budget.
Definitely.
I mean, you got to have guardrails, right, for something. So the most common guardrails are going to be your budget and goals. So, and those are things you can control to some degree. Maybe not budget. Budget sometimes you can't control, but you can also control where you spend your time. So I would add one other thing there is time. So it really comes down to the context of what you're selling, who you're selling it to, your competitors, right? You got to look at it holistically. That's where we got to get back to more marketing fundamentals. I think there's a lot of crap on LinkedIn, and I'm sure I've contributed to some of the crap. So I apologize. But there's a lot of just people spewing some stuff that, if taken verbatim or taken, without the right context, it is just really bad, advice or just wrong. So, go back to the things that that you can control. And I think the biggest thing is study different perspectives to get that, opinion that then informs the decisions you make.
Love that.
Yeah. I was going to say, the only thing I was going to say is kind of once you understand your audience and build the audience first, I think it's all right, cool. You're creating your story. What do I believe? Why do I believe in it? It goes back to the point of view. And we've created kind of this 8-step type of thing that it's all right, cool. Once you create your story, it goes through all the way through to defining a set of principles that add to your point of view. You're building an asset. And part of the whole people first thing within a go-to-market is how do you find a partner? The power of distribution. Because why go to market alone when you go to market with others? And then it's like, how do you amplify your asset? Which is basically, taking your one thing, chop it up into a bunch of other things. But always build an audience first, I think, is important to have kind of like before that. And then, I mean, just on our website, we have like the 8 things of how to do this after you get started.
Totally. And I'll drop the link in afterwards. But even if you're even earlier and you're really not there yet, like understanding where your customers are spending the most time while they're possibly in a research learning mode. And then those can be the channels that you focus on. To your point about budget and everything. Yeah, if you have a really limited budget, but you know that your person lives on Instagram, I mean, making something up here, then that's where you need to invest. Like you have to be where your people are. And if you don't know where they are, then yeah, go back and start at step 1. All right, we're pretty much at time. The last question was really, does this apply to any specific type of brand? I feel like this is obviously valuable for tech, but this applies to everybody. You can't launch without knowing your customer. That's a recipe for failure. So.
Yeah, I mean, I personally studied a lot and still do, like a lot of local businesses. I think local businesses adopt this mindset a lot more, and they do it sometimes a lot better. So maybe that's another session we do, but I have a lot of examples of local businesses in the town I live in that have adopted a people first kind of motion that allows them to grow using the power of defining a word of mouth channel. So
love. Yes. So true. So true. All right. We're a little bit over. Any last thoughts y'all want to share before I tell everybody to go check out TACK?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Kinsey, for having us.
Thank y'all. This was so fun. All right. So anybody you have questions, you can get in touch with Nick and Mark at TACK. I have their company linked here in LinkedIn, but I'll also drop the link to their website in after we hop off, so you'll be able to connect. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks.